The 50s, a decade when pop socks were considered daring and people still said bother when they hit their thumb with a hammer. The music was awful, but the cars were worse, chunky and drab. So can you begin to imagine the effect that this car had on visitors to the Turin Motor Show in 1953? It's called BAT 5, and it was the work of Franco Scaglione, a man who had learned his trade in Italy's aeronautical industry. Underneath, it's an Alfa Romeo, but on top, it's Thunderbird 4, Stingray, and Chuck Yeager's Bell rocket ship, all rolled into one. It may well have cleaved the air like a bullet, and sure, it was 15% faster than the Alfa saloon on which it was based, but it was never going to be a production reality. After a quarter of a turn, the wheels were rubbing against the front wings. Visibility from that cockpit was poor. It's like being in a postbox. And then there were the headlights. Or rather, there weren't. So they tried again in 1954 with a new Berlinetta Aerodynamica Technica car. And I don't know what they said to Franco, but it must have been something along the lines of, "Look, my old mates, really let your hair down this time. Don't hold back. Give us something really weird." This is what they got, BAT 7, the craziest car that had ever been produced, by miles.
Nothing yet. But baby, you just ain't nothing yet. It's something that you're never gonna forget. But baby, you just ain't nothing yet.
Like BAT 5, it has a simple Alfa chassis with a simple 1900cc engine, so it's not exactly the road burner you might imagine. Yes, it'll rev to 7,000 RPM, and yes, the motor has a brace of camshafts, but at 30 miles an hour, it feels like every single panel is about to fall off. I wasn't expecting it to feel as futuristic as it looks, but honestly, a horse with mustard on its parts is more refined than this. When this car lived in California in the early 1980s, some idiot actually raced it. Mind you, we also chopped the fins off, so he turned a nasty car to drive into an ordinary looking one. Americans, eh? Those fins, now back in their rightful place, may look like the creation of someone with little or nothing in his underpants, but they're there for two reasons. One, they give this car a drag coefficient of just 0.19, and nothing, even today, gets close. And two, Franco wanted to demonstrate that you could make great shapes out of metal. Radical thinking at the time. Again, and unsurprisingly, this car drew the crowds at the Turin Motor Show, but again, Alfa felt they could squeeze even more out of Franco. Oh, bigger doors would have been nice. Now, in the early 50s, the Turin styling houses were famed for building bespoke motor cars for the wealthy individual. The idea of a manufacturer asking them to design so-called concept cars was new. And that kind of showed with BAT 5 and BAT 7. They were wild, but a bit woolly. The third attempt, though, BAT 9, that was a cracker. It may not have been quite so far-fetched as its two predecessors, and at the 1955 Italian Motor Show, the crowds barely noticed it. But I think it's a little honey. There are shades of Corvette Stingray here, 8 years before America's first attempt at Buck Rogers styling first saw the light of day. But even the Vet is a wallflower compared to this. It still isn't fast, because it still only has that 1900cc engine. But sitting here with the windscreen curling round and those huge fins disappearing off into the distance, it really does feel like it should have wings, like the Speedo should be in Max and not KPH. After BAT 9, Alfa severed its ties with Franco and went off to be a mass-market manufacturer. Franco died, poor and tortured. Which is a shame because in the mid-80s, a Japanese businessman paid $18 million for these 3 cars. And that's a rotten bit of luck for him too, because they're now for sale at Coys of Kensington for just $4 million.